Hi, I'm Jeremy Fisher, and the 1002nd album is When the Pond by Fiona Apple.
Hi, I'm Jeff Steven, and you're listening to the 1002nd Album podcast. I spent 10 years going through the 1001 albums you must hear before you die, and now I'm asking people that are important to me all about the albums that are important to them. Enjoy! This is the 1002nd Album podcast. I'm Jeff Steven, and I'm particularly excited for today's show as today's guest is a three-time Juno nominee. He's the co-creator of the CBC Kids animated series, Jeremy and Jazzy, and by all accounts, he is a very pleasant human being. Please welcome Jeremy Fisher.
Hey, Jeff.
Jeremy, thank you very much for coming today. And Jeremy, the album of choice is Fiona Apple's When the Pond ...
When the Pond ... Yes, with the extremely long title that I've probably never read, even though this is the album that I chose to tell the world about. It's not for the title.
No, what follows the ... isn't the important part.
No. And not there's not that it's not a good it's actually a pretty interesting marketing ploy which I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it was a creative decision, but
right.
It definitely got press at the time. I remember just the fact that it was not a 2, 3, 5 word phrase, but an actual paragraph.
Yes.
You
Definitely before the social media era where you were confined to a number of characters and a message. So that's good. I guess my question for you would be then, so when did your Fiona Apple experience begin?
So it was on her first record, Tidal,
Yes.
which I discovered probably on Much Music is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember at that time I was at Mohawk College. I was taking a music program at Mohawk College in Hamilton, and I watched a lot of TV then, and so it could have also been if she made like an appearance on a daytime show or like a late night. Not late night so much because I was out gigging myself, but anyway, so it was on TV. And I remember being really just taken with the single Criminal.
Yes.
Because it has this whole, I don't know how long the outro is, like over a minute for a song that was like in heavy rotation on, the pop music TV station.
Right.
It's got this weird, sinister sounding, all these sounds that I couldn't identify them. It kind of sounded like an orchestra, but not. And it was just really like I was beguiled by it, and her voice, she just had this like smoke. She looked like she was probably 17 years old, but she had this smoky, throaty alto. And, being in jazz school and just like it just had all the elements that was right for me. It was interesting. It was not like everything else. It was hooky, but dark. And yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was just like the right time in my life to stumble across something like that, and it just totally captivated me.
For sure. And so against the usual conventions of the time where it was supposed to be, keep it short, keep it succinct, and not a minute long outro.
Yeah, that's right. Like these are the days of Lilith Fair and what was that? Spice Girls.
Yes.
Like there was this was like a new, there was a lot of like empowerment of women in music. And this was like a very, very different take on, that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Tidal as well, because the book I went through over the last 10 years, the 1001 albums you must hear before you die. The book included that 96 debut, but it didn't include this one. And I'm just curious, how do you think this follow-up compares to that original debut?
Okay, so I actually, even though Tidal was the record that turned me on to her music, this one was the one that made me a fan for life. Yes. And how it's different. So it's got a lot of the same people playing on it. The first one was produced by Andy Slater or Andrew Slater, who I think was her manager at the time, maybe still is. I do not know.
Mhm.
But you could tell it was produced. It was like probably more of an executive produced credit, because after going into the liner notes, what I realized is the person who plays the most stuff on there is a guy called John Bryan.
Okay.
And John Bryan is the producer of When the Pawn. So
Yeah.
he actually, I would say he's kind of the producer of Tidal as well, even though he's not credited as that. Like if you go into the Tidal
The,
Wikipedia,
yeah.
or the booklet here, I
Mhm.
kind of pulled it up. Like, so John Bryan plays guitar, vibraphone, tack piano, harp, dulcitone, marimba, chamberlin. What the heck is that? Optagon. What the heck is that? On like, and then he's got credits on all these different instruments on, it's like track 1 and 2, 6, 10, 1
Yeah.
through 3, 5. Anyway, he's just all over it. And then on When the Pawn, you really hear where he's actually the producer. You hear his full character
Right.
um, come out in the production, and I learned what all those things are from John Bryan. Not only did I become a Fiona Apple fan, I became a huge John Bryan fan, and we could talk a lot about that if you want.
For sure.
So that's what so it's just all those elements that I loved about Tidal were on steroids in
Yes.
When the Pawn.
In
And
the best possible way.
in the best possible way. Yeah, like it just on steroids is a bad metaphor. The metaphor I mean is this, like, where he may have been constrained in some ways, or they may have been constrained in their collaboration a little bit by a label, and it
Sure.
being a certain way, a certain vision.
Mhm.
It When the Pawn really feels like their imaginations went
Yes.
wild.
They had the creative
So
freedom
yeah,
to do what
and
they wanted. Yeah.
so this is why it's an interesting record for me in my music history, is
Yes.
that I got Tidal when I was in college, and then
Mhm.
when I finished college, I started riding my bike around and touring on my bicycle and
Mhm.
sleeping in a tent, and just like a real kind of freewheel and hippie lifestyle. And I did not have very much money
Mhm.
when in 99, when this record, I wasn't buying albums. Like I didn't even really have a place to live at the time. I was living in like a broom closet that some friends of mine let me stay in, who were going to McMaster University, and they just had this, like, I call it a broom closet. It was like a very small room that they were using as a closet, and I slept in it for a while. Anyway, I remember I was staying there, and I was leading farm tours at this like pumpkin patch for like,
Okay.
and my take home was like $30 a day or something like
Mhm.
that for leading students on farm tours. And I chose to spend half a day's earnings on this record because Tidal had been really important to me.
Sure.
And I was expecting, as we often do, Tidal Part 2, or
Mhm.
just like, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I don't find When the Pawn as accessible as Tidal is, which is probably why it's not discussed as much.
Sure.
But this was back in the days when music was an investment, right? Like
Yes.
you didn't just listen to 15 seconds of something on TikTok, right?
No.
I was invested, and the stakes were high for me because I might have bought 2 albums that whole year because I didn't have a lot of money.
That's a half a day's earnings, like you said.
Half a
Yeah.
day's earnings, right? So the stakes were, so I just had this thing, and I remember at my first listen, I was just like, this feels like this might be a little bit of work, this
Yeah.
one, because it just wasn't, it didn't pull me in immediately, or it didn't feel
Mhm.
comfortable to me, is
Okay.
I think the right way to put it. But I'd made my decision, and I'd invested my
Yeah.
money, and I've always been really into music, and I wanted to know, like, why did this, she's making an artistic statement. I should listen, and I should, really get into it. And I listened to it over and over and over again. And it's one of those records that if you don't do that,
Yes.
you're not gonna scratch the surface of it on a, peripheral listen while you're doing the dishes or whatever. Like
Hmm.
there's nothing on the record that, with the exception of maybe Paper Bag, and that might be the only one that is sort of like you could have that on and it just sort of is like it's a little lighter
Hmm.
melodic. It's just it's like it's sort of like you open up the windows and you can feel the wind coming in, that like in the middle of the record. But other than that, it's intense.
Sure.
And but I went deep on it, and that's how I learned about all these instruments that John Bryan uses, like the Chamberlin,
Hmm.
which is for anybody who doesn't know, it's a sampler instrument actually from probably the 60s is my guess. I could look it up here, but I'm not gonna. You can do the Googling.
Yeah.
It's like the Mellotron, which is the more popular version, which
Right.
is everybody knows, like Beatles, Strawberry Fields,
Yes.
and flute mellotron
Hmm.
sounds are really popular, right? And mellotrons work with, they have little tapes, and each key triggers a little tape that plays a little loop of a flute. Chamberlain might have even predated the mellotron. I'm not sure. I think it could be one of those things like Beta versus VHS, where it's
Right.
like they just didn't have the marketing. They
Yeah.
didn't have it didn't for whatever reason it didn't take off. Like they didn't have the Beatles, I guess that's
No.
one thing. And
That's a pretty good
so
testimonial to have in the the
y-
product sort of catalog.
yes, it is. It is. And then the Optagon, which is another one that he plays on there. That's another version of it, but instead of it being on tapes, it samples instruments and puts them on these discs. Are they discs, or they might actually be, anyway, and Optagon I think refers to some kind of like optical, there's some optical mechanism.
Okay.
Anyway, all these so John Bryan is like a curator of these very interesting, obtuse, definitely in 99
Yeah.
nobody was playing this kind of stuff.
No.
Nobody like, it was like Foo Fighters and Blink 182, and production was starting to get really saturated,
Right.
oversaturated, and this is like dynamic and delicate at times. And anyway, so that's why especially in the time, in the year, it just took a lot of kind of work to get into it. But I argue that the work is worth doing because it is a deep record, and there's tons. It's like the recording's got like all the emotions. It's got humor. I hear humor in the production. Like I
Yeah.
love the first track, On the Bound,
Yeah.
has this whole like, Chamberlain sort of like hook line that then like the guitars and other instruments are trading licks back and forth
Yeah.
with. I don't know, it's just really, really interesting musically, very interesting, and then very deep lyrical subject matter.
For sure. And I find sometimes those are the most rewarding too, where there's not necessarily the immediate singles right off the bat, but like you said, the more you listen, the more you just immerse in it, and it ends up having that huge return. If you put in that effort and time, then you get that really
Yeah.
nice experience out of it. You mentioned the production obviously was a big selling point, but you just alluded there to her songwriting as well. And I think I might have been in recent years more familiar with her interpretations of other works, or like the Across the Universe cover, or that sort of thing, which she does a
Hmm.
fabulous job. But what sort of strikes you about Fiona Apple as a songwriter?
Well, this plays well to the title. She can be quite verbose.
Yes.
Maybe that's the word we were looking
Yeah.
for. Title. It's verbose. Yeah, it's experimental. Um, Adventurous might be a better description. That experimental sort of sounds like Brian Eno or something like that. But yeah, I find her adventurous with melody, and um, you know, pretty fearless.
Right.
Um, almost. I would also say, especially maybe at this time when she was younger, like reckless a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But not that's not a bad thing. It's just like I think that's a part of youth.
Sure.
Um, however, even her more recent stuff, does have can have that sort of streak of rebellion. I don't know what her musical background is, but I
Mhm.
probably did at one time, but I couldn't pull that off the top of my head right now. But it's whether this comes from her collaboration, like there are some really interesting chord
Yes.
progression choices and voice leading. Like, oh, this is in a weird tuning. There's like I used to play paper bag
Yeah.
sometime. Um, I don't remember, but that was always that stuck out. Like the
Yeah.
thing to do. So this is here. Sorry, you might have to edit this
Oh,
part,
that's
but me just like
okay.
I'll tune this up. So sorry. So speaking of Lilith Fair, so another album that I was really into at that time, Surfacing, Sarah McLachlan, right?
Yes.
Um, Building a Mystery,
Yep.
same.
Yeah.
Same as
Little
Joan
Joan
Osborne.
Osborne. What if God was one of us?
Yeah, those were happening right around the same time, right? Or a
Yeah.
little bit before. And I even have I got a song called Cigarette, same chords.
Yeah.
Super common six minor, 4-1-5 progression.
Great.
And Fiona Apple wouldn't. I guarantee you, I haven't heard her entire catalog or every song she's ever written, but I would put money on. I bet the farm on the fact that she has
No.
no songs with that chord progression. Hers goes. It's like you thought that this might be like because the Sarah McLachlan, Joan Osborne, and Jeremy Fisher
Yeah.
progression is it sounds minory because it starts in the minor, but it's actually in a major key.
Right.
And Fiona Apple makes you think she's going there, but she's like, no, this is really in a
Yeah.
minor key. And there's something like kind of it leads you this one here is just more beige, it's more open, whereas
Yeah.
this one is like you're going that's what makes it truly a minor progression. So anyway, um you know that's like that's not like a huge, it's not like Steely Dan style, like technical songwriting, but it's a choice. Like I would wonder if it kind of leads you as a listener with these other references from the time that are like that make your ear think it's going to go one way and she
Yeah.
takes another. That's what that's pretty interesting.
Oh, for sure. And it was right off the bat, On the Bound hooked me in right away because there's that, I can't remember who the quote's attributed to, but the line like, for a great song, all you need is three chords and the truth. And I find with Fiona Apple, she only needs two chords a lot of the time. And on the On the Bound, there's that great, I think it's an F minor to an E that she keeps going back and forth to. And it just sets, yeah, like you said, it's sort of, it has that very minor, very low feel to it. And but
Yeah.
just I could hear her go back and forth between those two chords over and over. And it showed a couple of, I think, Criminal in the verses too. It's that again, two chord pattern again for the most part as well.
It's a
And
vamp.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a vamp.
But
That.
she vamps like a champ though, and so it's just it's yeah, no, it's and so I found that was really engaging. How you're right, it's that sort of unexpected, like, oh, you're anticipating she'll go here, but she'll always take us in another direction,
Hmm.
which is great. And the and doing so, I guess it's primarily based in the piano as well. And I was wanting to ask you about her vocals and piano separately, but the more I thought about it, the more I found them somewhat inextricable. And so, what are your impressions of her if she's a singer, songwriter, pianist? What do you have to say about the singing and the piano part as well?
Well, it is definitely piano driven. Like
Yeah.
even when you hear guitars, and even when it's not her playing the piano, like Criminal, for example. Like I did wonder that as the like, jazz school
Yeah.
kid. I wondered, is that her freaking out on the piano at the end of
Yeah.
Criminal or whatever? And it's not. It's she also plays piano on the song, I
Mhm.
believe. So there's a lot of layers to what's going on. But I saw her live on this tour. Actually, I saw her on
Okay.
When the Pawn tour, and she played piano most of the time, but she also did just sing a little bit because she had another keyboard player there with her. I think that there are those musicians like singers that they call top liners, who just will come in and they've got a track or another writer that kind of comes up with the musical bed and then they
Mhm.
they sing. And she doesn't strike me as somebody that would write that way. It does seem very much tied to the her piano playing, and
Sure.
she has a distinct style certainly of playing and writing. So yeah, I'd agree with that. I still think that certainly the vocals are distinct,
Yes.
and she definitely could have made a career as simply a vocalist,
Yes.
um, if she had chosen. So
Mhm.
yeah, I see what you're getting at. I do think that but she didn't do that. So
Right.
I suppose they are
Yeah.
inextricable.
I guess it's a nice problem when you do multiple things well, also. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
yeah.
but you're right, that voice is, yeah, there's nothing quite like it. So, yeah, very distinct. I guess we've talked about a couple of tracks. You mentioned Paper Bag. I talked a bit about On the Bound. Were there other sort of standouts from the set for you?
Yeah, the I love the last song,
Yes.
which is called I Know.
Yeah,
I know.
I
Yeah,
know.
I know. I know what it's called. Um, yeah, it's just like a timeless
Yes.
ballad. And that one, yeah, I would say it had such an impression on me. Like I've tried to end a lot of my records with not, some rip-off version of that song, but with that sort of flavor. I when I think of an album,
Hmm.
I never want it to go out on a banger. Like
Yeah.
I don't hear I never think, oh, I'm gonna it's to me it's always that like that song is just sort of the perfect like warm hug
Hmm.
to send you on your way at
Right.
the end of it. It's just like it's such a perfect the string arrangement on it is classic, that it's got these dark tones, and it just feels like, you could listen to that song in any decade from the 40s until now,
Yes.
and it sounds like it belongs anywhere in there.
Right.
So yeah, that one's a really special song to me. What else? Well, the Chamberlain, the part we already
Yeah.
talked about, and On the Bound, the
Yeah.
all the textures and the is it limp that's got the little drum machine at the beginning, like the filtered drum machine.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's that one. Oh, you know what else I like? I'm just looking at the song titles all here. This is helpful. Oh, maybe it's Fast as You Can.
Oh yes, that's a really quick pace to it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But there's like a 60s spy movie vibe to a
yeah.
lot of her stuff. But I do love the sort of the mix of like even in 99, you know, or whenever
Yeah.
they made this, probably 97, 98.
Mhm.
It was like a real interesting mix of classic and
Yes.
modern production. And yeah, like I'm just looking here at the credits. Yeah, they're pretty. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got to work with an engineer that's on this record. That
Oh,
was a
nice.
thrill for me. Greg Collins.
Okay.
Um, and I got to meet the engineer one time, just incidentally, when I was in at a studio in New York City. He had a room, and the guy I was in there with was friends with him, and we walked in, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're the engineer on Fiona Apple record that I love." Anyway, yeah, there's like tons of programming going on here, and violins,
Yeah.
viola. Like Jim Keltner plays drums on it. I mean, this Matt Chamberlain
Yeah.
plays drums.
I think did I read somewhere that they got Chamberlain to play the Chamberlain as well too, just to have that
Oh, did
extra
they?
layer to. I think so. I thought I read that
Yeah,
somewhere.
that's a weird
Or if not
coincidence.
missed opportunity, I guess. And so,
But what a incredible cast of
yes.
characters on this record. I think this is I forgot Jim Keltner was on here. If
Right.
I ever excuse me, if I ever knew that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have digressed from whatever your question. Sure.
It must have been a good one.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the nice thing is that there's so many standouts in the way of the tracks themselves, the production, the performances, the tone, the lyrics, just the whole package is something else. And so the I guess that which may actually be the answer to my I like to do a catch-all question of what's the sort of closing statement as to why this is the 1,000-second album that one must hear.
Well, it's timeless. The whole
Yes.
album is timeless. And so I think whenever you're listening to this podcast or whenever you're through your first 1001 albums that you must hear and you've got a little time left, I think that the reason you need to hear it is because it's really like nothing else. It's like nothing else in her catalog. It's like nothing else that was ever on pop radio. And it's a fun ride.
Yes.
If and it's like, you know, I'm gonna assume anybody that's listened to 1001 albums all the way through, you know, and they're on to their next one, are probably into headphone listening, and it's definitely a headphone record because it is so dense, but it's so expertly recorded that you can hear every little bell and whistle and everything that's going on in there. It's a really rich listening experience.
Well, I'm convinced at least. And
All
so,
right.
I know you're right. And that's what's nice is that I know it's from 1999, but you could have put any date beside it, and I would have probably believed it because you're right. It doesn't sound like anything that was comparable at the time or before or since. It just seems to be uniquely Fiona Apple, and that's
Mhm.
I'd say that's pretty good praise.
Yeah. It's also one of those albums that I think I've mostly only listened to it as an album. Like it's
Yes.
one of you know, you have these records that like you're like, oh, I've got I want to listen to a song or a couple songs, or like I've got 20 minutes to do the whatever dishes or tidy up.
Mhm.
And it's like if I don't have the 40 minutes or however long it is, like I'm not putting it on. It's like
Yes.
I'll put it on. Sometimes I drive home late after gigs, you know, and if I'm like, okay, I got to get through it, and I got to stay awake for an hour, that's the record I put on, you know? It's like I would be surprised if I've ever just gone through and sort of cherry picked like two songs and
Yeah.
moved on, you know. I don't think I have any of those songs on any playlist I have anywhere, you know.
Right.
Like it's just it's a record to
Yeah.
me.
And it would feel unresolved if you didn't get to I know at the end. It would feel sort of
Yeah, yeah.
unresolved. You need that closure at the
I
end.
don't get my warm hug.
Yeah. And the yes, what's I guess that was Olaf and Frozen. He likes warm hugs, and I guess that's true for us all with Fiona Apple. So that's good. But a huge thank you for coming today, Jeremy, and very much appreciated. And until the next time.
Yeah, well, it's nice to meet you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on your show.
Likewise, take care. This has been the 1000-Second Album Podcast. Thanks for sharing some of your time, energy, and attention with us today. Take care.